do that reflection.
Nope.
Well, good evening. How's everybody?
Good.
Everybody been behaving themselves this week? Have a big time while you were off?
I was working the whole time still.
Yeah, you were. Alicia's about through with her cap. We're going to work on tune it up a little bit. She's about ready to submit it. So she's been burning the midnight oil when everybody else was loafing like me, just loafing.
Yeah, and I combined all the tasks and I just sent them to you. So once you get a chance to look at it, you can just.
I'll do it tonight, and I'll go through and we'll get you ready for submission. And so, yeah, we've been working individually. Just as a reminder, Dr. Sain's going to be on next week and going to do budgeting at the local level, and then we'll finish up shortly thereafter. And so we've got our case study tonight. But just as a couple of reminders, if you need help, send me emails. We work individually. Remember, we're trying to do the gradual release to get you to take more responsibility, and y'all have done that really well. Your work's been great. I think Lana and Derek, I know, have gotten fours recently, and Sarah. I mean, a lot of folks are doing really well. So it just goes to show that you can do more than you think you can. We're not abandoning you, but we're shifting responsibility to you. To that end, we got to get the skip and the cap started. Got to get the skip done and the cap started. As I told you, you got to have the first two done in order to have a shot to finish this summer. Summer's going to be very busy. You got to put together your SOP. It has 6 tasks. You got to do your standards project. You got your competency folios to knock out this summer. And because of the changes in the licensure, to be redundant, your degree has to show that you finished the last week of July. And so that cuts a week off summer. And so you only have like 7 weeks to get all your evidence work done. And you count with me, 6 tasks of the SOP and 4 of the cap. That's more than we have weeks. That's why you got to knock a couple out this time, or in between that week in between we have all. You need to arrive at 6:05 this summer, at least having started your cap. And remember, schools, you know what happens as soon as May hits in schools, there'll be no more data collection and that kind of stuff because everybody is in exam mode. So that's also one of those things that, it's going to be hard to collect data for your cap. You don't have to collect any data for your SOP. Remember, it is a compilation of the first 5 evidences that you have done. So you don't have to, you can do it on your own, but you got to collect data on that cap, and you got to have access to people to collect data, because this is one of those you can't just send a survey. Cap task 2 is qualitative. You got to go interview and talk with people. Well, not much of that happening during exam time. So, don't let off the gas is what I want to say to you. Now, in preparation for Dr. Sain next week, make sure you do your 2 weekly activities. Most of you have knocked those out. Let's look at those right quick before we go to our case studies tonight. And so, in preparation for his presentation next week, make sure that you have talked to your school principal or your administration about the 5 most important steps in the school-based budgeting process. Now, this actually is a trick question. We don't really care what the 5 steps are. We just want to know that they've got a process, but we don't want to be impertinent and rude and ask, do they have a scheduling process? But we ask, what are the 5 steps in your scheduling process? And if you get I don't know, or we don't really have any, that means they don't have a plan. They just, whatever, it's not really tied to the school improvement plan. It's not tied to the school improvement team. It's whoever hollers the loudest, or we just divide it all up equally, which is not a plan. Remember, your budget should support your school improvement plan, just like your master schedule does. And so we ask this question this way so that we're not accusing anybody, but we need to know that they've got a plan. And it circles back to that school improvement plan. And the other is to locate a copy of your budget. This will be very helpful for Dr. Sain's presentation, where you can look at all 4 of those categories of money: federal, state, local, and school money. And that's where fundraising comes in. And we've already talked about that. So if you've done these, you will be prepared for his presentation next week. And I'm very excited about it because it's great. You'll really get a lot out of it. All right. So let's talk about our case study this evening. Somebody sent me an email today and wanted to go first. Who was that?
That was me.
That was Allison.
Yes,
All
sir.
right. She's leading us off tonight.
Okay. Kimberly, are you going to share for us?
Okay, I can.
Thank you.
Sorry if it's small. I tried to. Is the big one showing or still the small one?
Small.
It's kind of a medium sized one.
I'm sorry.
I think we can see it.
Wait a
Yeah,
minute.
we can see it. I think we're good.
Yeah, I think we're good.
I'm sorry. Here it is. Sorry. I'm so sorry.
All right.
Right.
There
we go. Yeah, there we go. Okay.
Sorry about
So
that.
our group is Kimberly. There we go. Kimberly, Sparks, Everlyn, and me. Okay, so the background, Eugenia, the principal, was approached by a third grade parents, or a third grade parent, Parents Association. They were upset about one third grade class because they felt that the teacher, who is Sylvia, was spending too much time focusing on the students with special needs, while their own children were falling behind compared to the students in the other third grade class. Sylvia is an experienced teacher who has been recognized for her very effective teaching methods. The teacher becomes upset when notified of this issue because she feels that she is accommodating all of her students. The top students in the room those students' focus is on kids helping kids. And then the special education students, Sylvia gives them special activities and sits with them as they tackle, she sits with them as they tackle the activities. The first question said, how might the principal approach this and future meetings with her teachers? Is it necessary to choose one approach over the other? Okay, so Eugenia should know her classrooms and should have been in them enough to already understand Sylvia's teaching methods. So the principals need to be in the classrooms, and this is both Eugenia and the other administrator need to, be in and out of the classrooms and kind of understand what's going on in those classrooms. Eugenia kind of needs to change her approach. She should be less accusatory towards the teacher and maybe more inquisitive when speaking to teachers about issues such as this. Then observe that teacher in order to be fair to her, which is an ethical paradigm. There's different ways to approach situations. The approach of the administrator is dependent upon the information, its source, and the relationship of the educator. So what we discussed is you need to have the administrators have relationships with their staff members. And just like, we all have relationships with each other, your people. so you know how to approach your people. And Eugenia didn't seem to know that about her people. She didn't handle it well at all, we didn't feel like. Eugenia maybe should have spoken with a special education teacher. I'm not really sure why she approached the technical coordinator. If she was unsure about laws, if she had special education questions, then maybe go to a special education person. This is a good way to create problems among staff members. And then Eugenia needs to familiarize herself with FERPA and special education laws, because she is setting herself up for a lawsuit because she is stirring up problems. And then what is the path that Eugenia should take? Both administrators should have been in the classrooms enough to be familiar with their teachers and their teaching strategies. Accepting the word of parents about what goes on in the classroom should not have happened, because Eugenia or the other administrators should have been aware of her teaching methods in the classroom. Observing Sylvia's classroom and then speaking to her would have been the correct path to take. Sylvia is doing all that she can and is doing her best to make her classroom work as an inclusion classroom, although this is not possible as a single teacher. If the special education students are in fact supposed to be getting inclusion services, and there is not an EC teacher in the room co-teaching with Sylvia, then this is an illegal practice, which both the experienced administrators and teachers should know, because they said there were 3 specialists there, but they didn't say what the specialists were. They didn't say that they were EC specialists. They didn't say what they were. So if there's an EC teacher there and they go in the classroom, then that's fine. That would be inclusion. But if they're not an EC specialist in there, then that's not inclusion. All IEPs include where a child's services are to take place, and that is in the least restrictive environment, LRE. That is not a principal, teacher, or parent decision. It is made by each special education student's IEP team, and it cannot be changed without an IEP team meeting. If the team determination is that a student needs to be in a regular education setting, then that child would be served in Sylvia's classroom by an EC teacher, which is inclusion, and Sylvia, and that's co-teaching. If special education setting is a better fit for a child, then that student would be served as special education classroom by a special education teacher. This is not a choice. Nobody in the school gets to choose to pull out a special education student and teach them wherever they want to. This is a federal law. In addition, there are FERPA laws that protect the privacy of all students. So the reasons for any student's classroom placement is not the business of anyone except administration and the child's parents. Eugenia should not have talked to so many people about this situation because she let it get out of control.
Is one point of view more correct than the other, and why or why not? Neither point of view is more correct than the other. The law must always be followed no matter what. And I believe the point of view is which set of students should be serviced more than the other. What kind of collaboration from the children's families might the principal and the teachers propose in order to improve the inclusion education program, encourage an appreciation for diversity, and stimulate learning for all the students at the school? Some suggestions were special education and general education teachers both use email, Dojo, Google Classroom to inform the parents about upcoming tests or assignments and events, and to share resources with the parents. Have workshops on co-teachings for families to explain how it works. And that would also include showing the strategies, and then have workshops on co-teaching for teachers on strategies, examples, grouping, stations, mirroring, split classes, etc. As an expert in the area of learning and evaluation, what might Ishmael, the technical coordinator, do to integrate and create some harmony out of the differences and opinions among the teachers? Ishmael could find online platforms to assist with differentiation of text. Examples, reading A through Z has books, same text with different reading levels and appropriate level worksheets. He could assist teachers with differentiating for special needs students by using websites such as Flipgrids, which allows teachers to facilitate video discussions. Each grid is like a message board where teachers can pose questions called topics, where the students can post video responses instead of writing or typing that appear in a tiled grid display. Ishmael could also assist with locating resources for students to have assistive technology as the accommodation of their IEPs. Those items can be difficult to obtain, especially in low income rural areas.
And next we talked about the actions that Sylvia might take with the families of the children in question in order to learn and share the achievements and experiences that have been observed among them. We talked about her implementing family engagement nights, maybe posting those things, of course, with the permission of parents, to the school website page, Facebook, Twitter, or TikTok page, giving positive feedback from teachers through postcards and newsletters, and maybe even implementing award ceremonies for students.
This would be short and long-term goals from the skip, wouldn't it?
Yes, sir.
Correct.
Amazing how that works.
Yes, sir.
Amazing. Oh, did I read too many? Oh, my bad.
No, you're good. We're good. Okay. So before we get to Dr. Sane, who is the EC maven, and we'll let him talk about that part of it, let's review quickly what we've covered this semester. Michelle's group wants to go next. Okay, that'll be fine. Let's review our OMA and the skip. Now, remember, I told you this case was going to touch on every part of what we've done this semester. Now, our first group tonight, they mentioned a problem. I don't know if they didn't elaborate on. So our first problem goes right back to the OMA. How do you guess this school was scheduled? Do you think that they put their federal programs first, or they put teacher input first? What is the probability that all the EC kids and all the AIG kids found the same classroom in the third grade? Other classrooms don't have any. This one has them all. Would you normally schedule a school that way if you put your special props program first, being a priority in scheduling? Of course not. We let teachers decide the schedule more than likely, and we put all the EC and all the AG in the same room so the AG could teach the EC kids. And then the kids in the middle end up with nothing. So it's not incidental or accidental that parents are trying to burn the place down. They're mad as fire. Well, it goes back to that simple rationale for scheduling. Federal programs come first. We accommodate the rest of our master schedule by those special POPs programs, EC 504, AIG. Those come first. They didn't in this case, and this is what happens. All right. Task 2 of the OMA, we went back and we revisited our professional growth plan from last semester. What's the heart of the professional growth plan? Is getting off your butt and getting out of your office and being in those classrooms. Did this principal do that? Why, of course not. She didn't even know what was going on in the room. And she sent some boy that was the IT guy that jiggled the handle or turned the machine on and off. The technology guy. She sent him. What does he know about instruction? You should have called me. I know as much as he did, and I know very little about instruction. The master schedule was wrong. It didn't link back to supporting the school improvement plan. The schedule was backwards. They let teachers decide the schedule, not federal law. They violated FERPA. Oh my Lord. They didn't do the curriculum. They didn't have a mission vision for their curriculum in terms of how we teach. They did no professional development on the inclusion model. There was no training on that. That goes back to our professional growth plan. If we're doing the inclusion model, nobody knows what it is or how to do it. Well, we've done no training. We've done no supervision. We just said we're going to have this, and we left it up to whoever to determine. And then we violated laws. We've done everything that we can do. We would plug in our short-term communication goals and our long-term parent nights to get our parents on board so they would share in our vision and our mission of serving all kids. They would understand about the EC program and what inclusion meant. We would not only did we violate EC law with our inclusion program, did we serve the professional growth plans of the AIG kids? That's federal too. Remember, they're a special POP too. Did we meet their IEP/PEP? Well, of course not. Now, I'll tell you a quick story of my personal experience. A million years ago, in a land far, far away, I was a high school teacher. And I taught in the era of the old comprehensive high schools. That meant you had 3 tracks. You had a regular ed track, you're going to go to work or going to go to the military. You had the vocational track, and then you had the college prep track. Well, I was unique in that I taught the upper level classes, what would be considered the AIG kids in chemistry and physics, but I also had to teach a repeater section in biology, which would be the low kids, a lot of them EC. Now, I can tell you, having the high kids teach the low kids, that's just remediation for them. They're not learning anything new. You're just warehousing them at best, getting free labor at worst. That is not a best practice to have your upper kids teach your lower kids. That malpractice is on both groups and violates both ends of federal law, the upper and lower on the EC. What I did for biology, for those repeater kids in biology, had nothing to do with what the upper kids did in those classes. You can't make that be right, folks. I'm just telling you. We know what the law is, but I'm talking about in practical. There is no argument that you could make to me that you could convince me that it would be the right thing to have the upper kids teach the lower kids, because you're malpracticing on both of them. It's not like, well, one group's not getting what they need, but the other is. Neither group's getting what they need. And so this principal, the bad example of how to run a school. Number one, you don't run it from behind your desk in your office. Didn't know what was happening, didn't create a shared vision among the faculty, didn't have a shared vision out in the community, the philosophy or vision of the school, wasn't supporting federal law, did the wrong thing on the master schedule, letting teachers make it out. And this is what you get. And as somebody pointed out in last night's group, my Lord, I mean, this whole crowd could have rode the same car to bus to school every day. There wasn't 28 teachers, 300 kids. It's not like you couldn't get around to everybody. You could be in every classroom every day if all you got is 28 teachers. How is it that you don't know what's going on in a room in a school of 300 kids? You just don't want to. And the only people that get to claim they don't want to is 12-year-olds. Other than that has no basis in the adult world. I don't want to. Dr. Singh, tell us about what should be happening in an inclusion model.
Yeah, so that's what I was going to say. A lot of times, because the role of administrators is so large, we create our master schedule. It looks great. We've got the I beside of the teachers who are going to do inclusion. And then that's where it falls short. Inclusion is not just a piece of paper. It has to be occurring in the classroom. Co-teaching has to be happening. And then it also has to be communicated to the community and to your staff and then the community about what a co-teaching model is. Because really, in the way we run schools through MTSS frameworks, there should be co-teaching going on in probably every classroom. There should be facilitation of learning through different methods with our teacher assistants and just anybody in the buildings. But specifically for inclusion, because it is so connected to a federal program and lawsuits and money, you've got to monitor it as a principal or an assistant principal. I want to share one story that happens all the time, but I've been a part of a lawsuit as a part of it, where we had principal, basically start talking about, well, we have inclusion in our building, but it really doesn't happen. The EC teacher just sits in the back and grades papers. That was a sidebar conversation where, guess what? One of his teachers had a nephew who was in an inclusion classroom, had an IEP. Then it gets back to the school board, and then all of a sudden you've got the EC director going into the building and actually seeing that co-teaching was not occurring. As a principal, if it is on your schedule, if it is on an IEP, you must make sure that teachers are implementing all of those protocols and procedures with fidelity. It sounds very simple, but in the world of being an administrator, as you know, throughout the course of this semester, there is so much going on. But again, that has to be a priority, and it cannot be a technical facilitator who has no idea about PC. Or I mean, it has to be you. And the last point I'll make is that, even if you're not an EC teacher, and I think we talked about this when we went over IEPs or the EC law, that even though you might not have a background in exceptional children, you might have been just a grade level teacher, that can't be an excuse. Day one of you as being an AP, you must know that handbook front to back. There's no other exception. It is not easy to read. It's a lot in there, but you must know it so that you won't get sued, but more importantly, so that you do what's best by those kids.
Yes. Now, before we go to our next group, another quick and dirty story. I was an elementary principal, and one day I was sitting in my office. Now, we had an old elementary wing, the Motel 6 design where every door went outside. And my office was at the end of that wing, and I was sitting there one day, and all of a sudden the lights in my office started shaking and the dust coming out of those. You remember those old long tube fluorescent lights that had the little like fan blades in between, and the dust started coming out of those things, and the ceiling started shaking, and what in the world's going on? And I come running out of my office, and we had a little small playground for the kindergartners right there at the end of them, and the kindergartners were using the electricity cables to climb up on the roof and jumping up on down the roof of my office. And the kindergarten teacher, and she was a 37-year veteran, and that didn't count the time she'd been out having her kids, and she was an elderly person. But remember, we were on the cusp of school accountability. This was the year before accountability started. And what she said to me, I come running out, and these kids are jumping up on the roof of the building, and they're climbing on electrical cables. Somebody ought to get control of those kids. And I said, it's you, Miss Perkins. That's what we hired you for. So my metaphor here is we have teachers in all of our buildings who will agree that it's our responsibility to teach all those kids, just not us. I don't want to be involved in that inclusion model. I don't want to have to deal with those EC kids. I don't want to do anything that's out of my comfort zone. That's why I talk about that shared vision. Everybody in the building has to know every kid is our kid. It's our responsibility. You can't say, yeah, I believe that EC kid ought to get a basic education, but not me. Back in the day, a lot of teachers said, yeah, kids ought to get taught, but I shouldn't be held accountable to teach them or any of that. Thankfully, we've gotten past that. None of you have ever worked in that environment. I have. It's not a good environment to work in. I mean, you can't get people to even agree that you ought to show up and work every day in that environment. Well, I shouldn't be held accountable. That kid's dumb. That's because of his parent. We have to accept the responsibility as school administrators to get our faculty and our communities to buy in that every kid is our responsibility. We can't just educate the easy ones. And that's that shared vision. That's what that communication, that's what those parent nights, that's what that staff development is, to get a buy-in. You don't know how to do this? Well, then we're going to train you to do it. We're going to give you the tools that it takes for you to be successful in educating every child in our building. That's your job as the school administrator. As Dr. Sane said, there's 1,000 things to do, but you got to have buy-in from your faculty that believes that it's our responsibility to make sure that every kid in our building learns. That's the core. What do they do at Jones Sausage? They make sausage. What do we do in school? We teach kids. That's our core competency. And we can never abrogate that responsibility. It's always ours. It's always ours. All right. We're ready for our next group, and that would be Michelle's group.
Okay, I'm getting ready to present right now. Maybe. Something's going on.
Let me stop my video. A lot of times if I'll stop my video, it makes it easier for you to share.
Okay, let's try. Can't. I'm having issues. I'm sorry. Let me let me go back in here and pull it back up.
Do you need me to share it, Derek?
I think I've got it.
Okay.
There we go. Okay. All right. Okay. And share. Are we good? Can we see it?
Yes.
Yes, we can. Yay.
All right, cool.
Okay, our group consists of Naima Branch, Michelle Brunson, Christian, Derek, and Christina. Success for all or success for some. We are summarizing the background of the case. So Eugenia is approached by a group of parents who are upset about how a teacher is serving special needs students instead of giving attention to the regular education students. Eugenia is not aware of any problem and assigns the help of another faculty member to gather information about what is happening in other classrooms. Eugenia meets with the third grade teacher, Sylvia, who informs her that she sits with the special needs students to ensure that they are learning the material and can finish the material. For the regular education students, she assigns workbooks and provides written directions. She motivates them to work independently. Sylvia says that the regular education students are still making growth and are helping others in the class show growth. Eugenia schedules a meeting with teachers from both grades to clear the air of tensions toward the two approaches toward special needs education. So how might the principal approach this in future meetings with her teachers? She should not share complaints from a parent about a particular teacher with other staff or faculty members. Eugenia should know what is going on in the classrooms and should not have to assign another faculty member to find out. For this meeting, Eugenia should remind the faculty members of the school's mission statement. For this meeting, she should allow teachers to share best practices on how they support the school's mission statement. Is it necessary to choose one approach over the other? So mainstreaming versus inclusion. In a mainstream environment, the exceptional student adapts to the general education classroom, whereas in an inclusion classroom, the curriculum is adapted to meet the specific needs of the students, including those with disabilities. Mainstreaming students with learning disabilities into the general education classroom during specific times of the day is identified as integrating. Students are taught math, science, history, and English with regular education students. Inclusion secures opportunities for students with disabilities to learn with their non-disabled peers in the general education classroom. General education and special education teachers work alongside each other to ensure that exceptional students receive individualized instruction, so co-teaching. Partial inclusion allows special education students to spend part of the day in a general education classroom while receiving the benefits of intensive small group instruction in a special education classroom for services.
Okay, so what is the path that Eugenia should take? First and foremost, like we've said time and time again, a principal should know what's going on in their building. So frequent, formal, and informal observations would give Eugenia the best picture of what's going on in the school. And on top of that, quality feedback is equally important after observations in order to improve. If Eugenia is getting into the classroom for observations and not giving that feedback of how Sylvia can improve, then she's not benefiting Sylvia at all. Obviously, review the students' IEPs with the special education teacher and the classroom teacher to make sure accommodations and goals are clear. And not only that the accommodations and goals are clear, but that they're going to be carried out. Meet with the parents to assure them that their children will be getting a quality education. And that should be all parents, whether they're parents of regular ed students or EC students. And research professional development opportunities for the faculty. Is one point of view more correct than the other? Why? So, although an IEP is a legal document that must be followed and special education students should be taught in the least restrictive environment, all students are entitled to a sound education. And this can be done with inclusion classrooms with careful planning.
One of the questions is, how can the principal, teachers, and families collaborate to make it better? One of the things that needs to be done is to create an educational program that has inclusiveness at its core. The principal needs to address the physical, social, and attitudinal barriers that exist. There should be consistent professional development for teachers. There should be a culture of inclusion that is open-minded, empathetic, and respectful. There should be adapted curriculum to meet the needs of learners. Make parents and the community a part of the process. Provide support services to meet the needs of all learners. Decision-making should be data-driven. There should be a promotion of peer support and interaction. That's an important thing. We're not saying that students mixed ability groupings can work. So having that type of interaction is important. And a goal of continuous improvement through constant reflection. They should also create an environment that accepts diversity, an environment that fosters a sense of belonging, promotes equity and social justice, enhances learning experiences, combats stereotypes and prejudices, prepares students for participation in a global society, encourages empathy and respect. What can be done? Develop a diversity-focused curriculum, organize cultural events, exchanges, guest speakers, expose students to cultures, traditions, and to different cultures, traditions, and perspectives, encourage communication and an open dialogue, and engage parents and the community.
All right, as an expert in the area of learning and evaluation, what might Ishmael, the technical coordinator, do to integrate and create some harmony out of the differences in opinion among the teachers? And I do want to stop. This is a slide created by Christina. She's at a conference right now for her upcoming job as AP. So I am reading some of her slides. So I just wanted to give her credit for her work. Ishmael can develop PD to help teachers support the diverse learners in their classes. If he completes an observation in the teacher's classroom, he can offer post-conference to discuss strategies that she could use in her classroom daily. Visit grade level PLCs to assist the teams with planning for all learners, and then collaborate with other TCs in the district to about how they're supporting teachers in their schools. All right. What actions might Sylvia take with the families of the children in question in order to learn and share the achievements and experiences they have observed among children? As a general education teacher, it is important to create a positive and inclusive classroom environment that promotes the benefits of having students with diverse needs in the classroom. Ways to help families understand these benefits without violating FERPA laws: provide general information, benefits of inclusion in the classroom without sharing specific information about individual students. Use general language that does not reveal any specific information about individual students. Focus on the benefits of inclusion. For example, how having students with diverse abilities in the classroom, such as promoting empathy, increasing social skills, and enhancing learning for all. Always maintain confidentiality, protect the privacy of the individuals, and seek guidance. If you are unsure about what information you can share with families, seek guidance from your school's special education department or administration. The 4 ethical paradigms we addressed for care. We've got the principal listened to the concerns of the parents and the teachers and responded accordingly. Within the profession, the principal is unaware of the various abilities of the students in the classroom, and critique, reviewing the situation, and making legal choices and ethical choices. And for justice, the principal must exercise justice by following the IEP and state and federal laws. And that is it.
Okay. I'm gonna go to Dr. Sane on this one.
All right. So quickly, just 2 things I wanted to point out. Michelle, I think you mentioned it. Quality feedback. We miss that so often because when we're doing our observations, especially through that NESIS tool, it becomes a checklist. I got to get this done, this done, this done. And so the purpose of that NESIS, if you actually go back and look at the origin study of NESIS, it was all based off of research from quality feedback. The reason it's so extensive, the reason there are so many check boxes, is because it wanted to hold principals and leaders accountable to give specific and quality feedback. And so when you have cases where you feel that teachers are not, or you're observing that teachers are not properly co-teaching, or they're not upholding any of their duties as a teacher, there must be hard conversations, but they can be driven through quality feedback. Again, going back to, you can't just say, oh, I know they don't do inclusion in that room. I don't know what else to do. She's been here for 25 years, or he's been here. He's getting ready to retire. Not my problem. It is your problem. But again, when we talk about evaluations, kind of tying in what we've talked about earlier, don't let that be a checkbox. Let quality feedback drive how you do your evaluations. The second thing I want to talk about, and this group did an amazing job talking about PD pathways or delivering PD. Group 1 did too. But what's so important in today's reality is, and I know all of you sitting here, you've been classroom teachers, how frustrating is it when you know 2 people aren't doing their job and then the whole staff has to sit through 4 or 5 PD sessions about that. So what I supported principals with doing is making sure that you had differentiated PD pathways for teachers throughout your building. And the best way to implement a differentiated PD pathway is start at the beginning of the year with a belief survey. What do teachers believe about kids? And what you're going to find is, especially if teachers believe that all students can learn, but they might not all achieve proficiency, that might not be the best teacher that you want in an inclusion classroom. And that's okay. You know, a part of us is, it's like chess with the master classroom. We want to make sure that students have the best match to teachers, instead of teachers having the best match to students. You know, we have to flip that around a little bit. And I just say those 2 things because that's gonna help solve your problem. One, with teachers being more invested in the PD pathway or the PD schedules, you know, and then also it becomes more specific to student need. But one of the things that as an administrator you've got to do in that opening faculty meeting and readdress it throughout the school year is what is co-teaching, what is inclusion, and that does need to be a blanket statement, because I don't, what I also see a lot in schools, and Dr. Lamb, you might see this as well, is that we identify one teacher that's always going to have the inclusion kids year after year after year after year, and typically it's the new teacher, and that is the worst practice to do. We've got to give, just because a teacher is veteran doesn't mean that they earn the right to have all the best kids, because most of our veteran teachers are probably the best with an inclusion cohort. They have the most experience. They have the most they have access to resources. They can teach lessons without opening a book. They've got it memorized. They can support kids. So just keep that in mind. Don't let a teacher who's been there 20 years dictate which classes they get. That's what gets you in problem.
All right, what's rationale number 4 in scheduling a school?
Yeah.
Outcomes, performance. Remember that? That's what Dr. Sain's talking about. We match kids to teachers, not teachers to kids. That's exactly what performance number 4, that's exactly what that speaks to. That we don't let teachers pick their kids. We put kids with teachers who get the best performance. That's number 4. That goes back to the master schedule. But he's right. We let teachers make out the schedule, and they give the one with the least seniority that the others don't like. We give them all the hard kids. That's not the way it's got to work. You got to, whoever schedules your school's in charge. I don't care what the title says on your door or your business card. You better know that. Now, Mike, we'll get to you in just one second with your question. Let me do my old man out in the yard shouting at clouds rant here. 2 things. Number 1, remember last semester when you did your professional growth plan and you did extensive reading by Linda Darling Hammond, who is the professional development guru? What did she say? She said, don't punish the many for the sins of few. She said, use whole groups sparingly. If everybody don't need it, don't make them sit through it. Divide them up into small groups, PLCs, or one-on-one coaching for those that are recalcitrant or the slow learners or the slow adopters. Don't punish everybody for don't, because 2 people on your faculty don't know something, don't make everybody sit through it. That's when you do that one-on-one in small group. That goes back to Linda Darling Hammond that we worked with extensively last semester. Now this is the old man out in the yard ranting at clouds. I told you last semester, I put myself through, by my own choice, my own stupidity, I put myself through NESIS training again. Boy, I still hadn't healed up from that. Man, was that brutal. And part of the reason why it was brutal for me is I don't agree with some of that stuff. And what I don't agree with is the sandwich method. I do not agree that we give feedback in a way that we say 17 positive things. We slip the one thing we really want to work on in the middle, and then we say 17 more positive things. Because we just told them 35 things we wanted to work on. Number 1, 35 is too many. 3 or 4 is more than enough. But what we need is for them to understand, we need to have those critical conversations. This is what I need you to work on. Don't sandwich it between all this wonderful stuff, because everybody's like me and everybody's the same. We only hear we only hear the positive stuff. Well, the point is of feedback is to get improvement, not to stroke their egos. The point of feedback is to get improvement, and you can't always say positive stuff. I'm old enough that when I taught school, we still had a Bible teacher in public school. That's how old I am. We still had a Bible teacher in public school. And Miss Smith was the nicest lady in the world. That's who I hope to be when I grow up. She was the finest human you've ever met. And if she couldn't say anything else about a kid, she'd say, well, he's got pretty eyes. We can't do that with teachers. We can't be always finding something. Sometimes we have to have those critical conversations. You're not good at this. That's okay. We're going to help you get better at it. But if we hide it, if we sandwich it in between all the positive accolades and back patting and all that, we'll never get any improvement. And that's where I separate from the modern NESIS training is they want loads of feedback and and it's got to be 99% positive, but it's the 1% that matters, the one that's not positive. And there, I get it. The emphasis should be, we should be trying to build teachers up, but the message gets lost if all we do is shining them on all the time. We need to have those critical conversations. You're not good at this, and we got to work on that. You know, you're not being successful. Your data is showing us you're not being successful doing this. That's what number 4 is all about, is outcomes, looking at their outcomes data. You're not being successful with this. We need to work on this. We want you to be the best you can be. You deserve it, and the kids do too. You've got to have those critical conversations. Excellent, excellent, excellent. All right, next group.
I think Mike had a question.
Oh, that's right. I'm sorry, Mike.
Based on you both of y'all experience, how do you have that critical conversation with veteran teachers about taking on the worst kids or the kids that's more challenging? How do you have that critical conversation? Because, you know, based off it, if it becomes a morale, I guess that's what I've seen. The teachers start complaining, mumbling between each other, and it causes an upstir in the nest, so to speak.
Yeah. Well, that's a cultural thing. And it goes back to that shared vision of why we're there every day. And one of the things that you have to do as a principal, and I tried to do it twice a year at the big work day, professional development day, work day, whatever you want to call it, where they were required to come, and I tell myself, I'm just going to go ahead and apologize now. If it's a choice between you and kids, I'm going to choose the kids every time. That we have to establish that we're here not to provide you a job, but for kids to learn. That's the critical conversation that you've got to have. You can't have people that's grumbling because you ask them to work. Oh my Lord. Think about that. And this is that conversation you got to have with people. And you know, is that I can't apologize for asking you to do your job. That's what I'm here for. We're here to educate these kids. What they do at Jones Sausage, they make sausage. We teach kids. I can't apologize. I'm not going to apologize for asking you to actually do your job. They won't all be easy, but I've got to put the best people in the places where we get the best results. This is a competitive business. We keep score for a reason. That's why that state report card comes out every year. Not only will they get me, they'll get you eventually if we don't do our job with these kids. And so it's that culture. You've got to build that culture of teaching and learning. You've heard me say that 1,000 times, all the town halls last semester when we would do those coaching sessions. We started with doing the data dive, forming PLCs, where we create a culture in our building of teaching and learning. That's what we're about every day. Not about adult convenience or having a place to get out of the rain or to get a check. We're here to teach kids, period. We create a culture of teaching and learning. So, Mike, that's the best question I've heard in a long time. But it speaks to why you're there and what your leadership vision is and why the door is open every day. It's not to provide people a job or daycare for families. It's for kids to learn. And you have to beat that drum every time that you got them, every time that you got that bully pulpit, every time that they're required to be there with you, every time. Kristen, answer your question is yes, that'll be fine. Every chance you got to get, you've got to go back and reiterate that culture of teaching and learning. That's why we're here. Love you, mean it. I'll buy you a shirt with a logo on it. We'll get you fried chicken on Friday. But we'll go to Price's Chicken Coop on Friday and get fried chicken. My heart fluttered just mentioning that.
It closed, didn't it?
I spent a fortune at Price's. I'll tell you, I did.
It closed,
right? Yeah, they closed. That was a Charlotte institution.
Sad.
They've been there for 50 years. Price's Chicken Coop.
Sad day.
Sad day. And Gus's Sir Beef is closing too. The Back of George family is closing. A lot of the old time places are leaving in Charlotte. That's a sign of the times. But yeah, Price's Chicken Coop, they could no longer afford to stay in South End because of the rents. Barbecue King, leaving Wilkinson, all the old time places, South 21. The world is changing. We have to keep up with it. But you know, I'll buy you chicken, I'll get you whatever. But in the end, you know, we got to be about these kids and about their learning. And you know, if you're angry about doing your job, then you probably need to, we don't need them people anyway. If people are insulted that you ask them to work, our core competency is teaching kids. There's a lot of other things we do, excuse me, but our core competency, why the door is opened every day and why the federal and state government sends us money and why the county commissioner sends us tax dollars, is to educate kids.
Just quickly, I'll give you a strategy that you can use, and it's one that my mentor taught me to do. Dr. Lamb, it's Dr. Neal. So she was my mentor as I was a principal. Dr. Neal she is an adjunct here at Gardner Webb as well. But I actually overtook. She was a principal, and then I came in and succeeded her as principal. And you know, we were in Kannapolis, North Carolina. There were a lot of behaviors, and so. I got into that school and there were a lot of teachers who thought that I've been here, I don't get the behaviors. And so one of the things you can do to kind of reverse that climate is stop talking about behavior. Talk about academics first and then talk about behavior instead of letting behavior dictate everything we do. So when you do that, the worst thing that I can think you could do is you give those placement cards at the end of the year where teachers fill them out, and then we go into the cafeteria and we start sorting out who's going to have what class cluster. And guess what dictates how you sort those cards? Behavior. Let academics be the start of your conversation and behavior secondary. I get it. Behavior can ruin a classroom. But we can't just start dispersing behaviors easily or giving them to the new teacher. It's got to be driven by academics. So that's just if a teacher comes to you and talks about behavior in a kid, reverse the conversation. Tell me what that kid's strengths are academically. What can they do? Make educators talk about academics first and then the secondary issues second. So
that leads me to a question, and I got to be careful not to sprain my shoulder, patting myself on the back here. How many times have you heard us talk about student behaviors this semester? How many times did you hear us talk about it last semester? How many times have you ever been with us at Gardner Webb and we didn't talk about teaching and learning and create everything that we do is about creating a culture of teaching and learning. If you get started on that behavior deal, it doesn't lead anywhere good. I can tell you that right now. And what Dr. Sane just said, I had to stop that when we went to accountability, we had to stop two things in the district that I was in at the time, and we stopped two things. And the superintendent supported it somewhat when he was sober when he was sober and at the job. First was we had to stop homogeneous grouping. Back in the day, we homogeneous grouped kids, bluebirds, robins, and buzzards. We had to stop that. And the second was we had to stop the placement card deal where teachers sorted who they wanted. We had to stop that. Those are just two things you can't do. Both of those are the antithesis of creating a culture of teaching and learning. They prevent a culture of teaching and learning, where the central focus every day is making our day easy and managing behaviors. That's all we do all day long is manage behaviors, and we just basically warehouse kids. You can't do that. So no, we probably don't spend enough time on managing student behavior in this program, but we're not going to, because that just does not lead us to where we need the kind of schools that we need to have. We just become management rather than leadership. And the last time I looked, we had leadership in the title of this program and not management. That's a great question. That is a great question. All right, next group.
That freeze?
Okay, did I freeze? Hold
You're
on.
with us now. I think it froze for a minute.
Yeah, it froze. Okay, hold on. I'll pull it open.
There
Is
you
it-
go.
Okay, it froze. Oh, wow. Okay. All right. Robin?
Okay. We have inclusion education, success for all, or success for some, and it includes Sandra, Jackie, Sarah, and myself. Inclusion is a term which expresses commitment to educate each child to the maximum extent appropriate in the school and classroom he or she would otherwise attend. It involves bringing the support services to the child rather than moving the child to the services. It requires only that the child will benefit from being in the class rather than having to keep up with the other students. Proponents of inclusion generally favor new forms of education service delivery. Secondly, we listed the least restricted environment. LRE supports the student's right to be in a general education classroom unless assessment data indicates that prescribed goals cannot be met in that setting with support services.
Okay, so the first question is, how might the principal approach this in future meetings with her teachers? The principal, Eugenia, could have approached this in a more positive way. There was no need to state that the parents complained. Instead, she could have inquired about how Sylvia approached inclusion. And this should have been followed up by visiting Sylvia's classroom at least once, but preferably several times to observe what is taking place. And is it necessary to choose one approach over the other? No, every situation is different and teachers should adapt the students to the students in front of them. But it is the principal's responsibility to schedule the inclusion teachers and courses in alignment with the law.
What is the path? Oh, I'm sorry. Did I miss that? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. Go ahead. So what is the path that Eugene should take? Eugenia should explain to the parents that she appreciates the feedback, but is also obligated to uphold the idea and provide an inclusion environment for all learners. The principal should spend time in Sylvia's classroom and gather evidence about her procedures to provide an environment that upholds a balanced general education program for all students. And the principal should also analyze various forms of data from Sylvia's students to make informed decisions about the teacher's methods.
Is one point of view more correct than the other? Why? No. In education, the only right answer is the one that both follows the law and best helps the students in your room. Teachers have different approaches based on the students who are in front of them. So what works for one teacher may not work for another one. There's room for many perspectives as long as the law is followed and students are receiving a basic education under the law. What kind of collaboration from the children's families might the principal and the teachers propose in order to improve the inclusive education program, encourage an appreciation for diversity, and stimulate learning for all the students at the school? Eugenia, the principal, should bring the parents of the inclusion students into the conversation. She should also ask the children their thoughts as well as observe the class herself. In addition, she could bring parents in to be a part of the small group work or as volunteers to help with differentiated activities under teacher supervision. The school could host a parent night to show student portfolios, projects, writing samples, and collaboration with peers. This also showcases the students' ability to explain what they have learned rather than adults fighting about it. Giving the parents a perspective on how the class is running and highlighting the quality of teaching and learning may change their minds about what goals and benchmarks their children are achieving.
So as far as Ismail's concerned as a technical coordinator, what should he do to create some harmony out of the differences in opinion among the teachers? Like has been said previously, there's no reason to make everybody sit through PD, but instead creating ways for teachers to collaborate and share their best practices. He could implement a system of instructional rounds or that type of model so teachers can visit one another's classrooms and see their different approaches in action and potentially learn something from one another. Allowing time to debrief and ask questions and work together on lessons, both horizontally across grade levels and vertically throughout the school, could make a great deal of difference in their attitudes towards one another's approaches as well. Really, Ismail's main responsibility is to create the space to be able to do this and to create time for this work to be done. And what actions might Sylvia take with families of the children in question to share their achievements and experiences? The idea of a parent night also applies to this question. She can best prove the children's achievements and experiences of all students by having them showcase what they have learned and taught one another. This approach will showcase the strengths of all students, helping the parents understand how their own students have grown, as well as how other students have grown within the inclusion model of education.
Questions? Okay.
Excellent.
right,
Again,
stop.
another excellent presentation. Dr. Sane, I'll go to you first, then I've got one point to make.
So I love that group actually had teaching and learning in there, like specifically in their presentation. So good job. All of it has been great. But I do have one question for the group. We talk about inclusion. We talk about co-teaching. Somebody give me one sentence summary of what inclusion / co-teaching is. Just one statement. Anybody want to go for answer that question? What is it? How can we describe it in one sentence? Or 3 words, 4 words.
I don't know about 3 or 4 words, but it's where where both people in the room are the teachers. It's not, you don't make where one's the assistant, and then there's the real teacher. But both of the adults in the room are the actual teacher, and they are literally either, well, there's lots of different ways you can do it. You can take turns teaching, or you can divide into small groups and teach. You can team teach. There's several different ways to do it. But what I found is the big key is making sure that the EC teacher doesn't seem like the assistant in the room versus the real teacher.
Yeah. No caddying, everybody's got to be a player.
Love it. You said it all. You shouldn't be able to tell the difference. You should be able to walk into a room and have a hard time telling who the EC teacher is. And just keep that in mind when you're monitoring an effective inclusion model. You don't know who the EC teacher is. You don't know who the regular ed teacher is. And when you have that model, parents don't get upset. They just don't. They actually celebrate it because their kid has 2 teachers.
Mm-hmm. To your point on the slide there that Jackie was covering, and I want to go a step further. In the chat, Kelly's with us tonight, and she says that she's got an interview coming up, and she's been asked to do a 15-minute presentation on managing student behavior. Well, as Jackie's slide alluded to there, a big part of that is engaging lessons, is instruction. And if I were being asked in an interview setting to do a presentation on managing student behavior, I would start that. I would start that with making sure that we were engaging kids in the classroom, and that's one of the tenets of inclusive education, is that EC teacher is monitoring that IEP, but also is helping to make sure that those EC kids are included, are engaged in that room. That's part of that role, and both teachers need to be able to do that. But my point is, we want all kids to be engaged, whether they're EC or regular. We shouldn't be able to tell. Not only should we not be able to tell the difference in the two teachers in the room, we shouldn't be able to tell the difference in the kids in the room either. They should all be at an engagement level. And that's always the problem when you put EC kids into the regular classroom, is they tend to shrink back and they're kind of just sitting there on their own. We need to see all kids engaged. Not only will kids learn more, they'll behave better. We know that to be the case if we offer engaging lessons. So that's part and parcel of the inclusion model too, is to make sure that we're engaging all of our learners in that classroom. And so that's part of this, is making sure that parents know that we're trying to engage every kid, that we're giving every kid a shot, that we're trying to facilitate all learners in this room, and parents, they need to know and understand that as well. All right.
Let's go follow-up question to Kelly's
Yes.
question.
Yes.
In that presentation that she's being asked, would you advise that she also talk about building relationships with her teachers and the students? Because as a, in my coach and teacher mindset, I think about relationships a lot when I think about classroom management and classroom support of behaviors. So would you advise in that presentation?
Oh yeah. Well, see, that those relationships are part of that engagement, where you make everybody feel like that they are an equal member in that room. That's that relationship building. That's part of that engagement piece. Engagement's not just making sure you take a list and go down the list and call on everybody, but that every member, you have a relationship, not only with you and the students as the teacher, but all the kids have the relationship where everybody is a full-fledged member, and you have to build those relationships. And part of that is if you always have one kid teaching another, there's a superordinate subordinate relationship there that you've built in. That person that's getting taught all the time is a junior member of the firm. They're not a full member of that classroom. You've enforced that upon that classroom. And so those relationships are so important. That's why we don't want to have those superordinate subordinate roles where one kid teaches another. Again, and that's a good point from Jackie, is you build that trust. Their kids are willing to take risks and do things, and they're not afraid to speak up, and they feel a sense of ownership in that classroom. And one of the reasons why kids act out is they have no ownership in their room. It's something being done to them, not with them. And so I would make sure engagement, collaboration, communication, relationships, all those pieces are what lead to the kind of behaviors that we want in school. On the backside of that, I would talk about the discipline system that the district, something like PBIS, where again, the heart of PBIS again is relationships and supporting behaviors and supporting good behaviors and building relationships with kids where they don't act out. I mean, that's a big part of PBIS. If you actually read PBIS, it's not just a way to do record keeping on misbehaviors. It's a way to try to build relationships and communicate with kids so that they do behave. Again, that's a very, very vital piece. If they're engaged in the classroom and in the learning, you rarely have discipline problems. But if they aren't, why do they care if they disrupt? It's not their room anyway. They see no vested interest. Andrelisa, you've got a question?
Yes, I was just going to piggyback off of the PBIS, because I'm actually the PBIS chair at my school. And so every month we have like a PBIS celebration, but we base it off of behavior. So we have like class dojo. So like they have to meet a certain percentage. So if they don't meet like 80%, then those students cannot participate. They have to stay back.
with another teacher. So this month, at the end of this month, we're going to do it's called the hop around. So the kids, the teachers will have something in their classroom where the kids will come in there for like 15 minutes and they'll do an activity, but the kids who did not make the percentage cannot go, but that makes them want to behave so that they can get the incentive at the end of the month.
Yeah. Yeah, there's that it's incentive based. That's not always good, but it's not bad. I mean, that's a viable piece. And kids, you do what you have to get the engagement from these kids, and get them to present the behaviors that they want. One of the things that you're going to understand about school when you get in a leadership role is you can neither punish your way nor reward your way to the kind of behavior you want from kids. You can't go one way or the other. You have to build the relationships where you have the ability to do either. But yes, rewards have to be a part of that as well. There also has to be consequences on the other side. But you've all been in places where, we only went one way or the other, and boy, they're terrible places. You're either in the one where they never discipline kids and it's just chaos, or it's like a prison camp on the other end. Neither one of those are conducive environments for teaching and learning. Remember, we're trying to create an environment for teaching and learning and have a set of standards or norms for that, for the behavior. It's what we're trying to do. So yes, positive behavior, the support system, a very needed piece. But there also has to be the other part as well. All right, we got one last group. All right, who's up? Is everybody been?
No, Anderlise is
Here
sharing.
it comes. There it is. I didn't think so. I thought, I'm old. I can't count to 4 sometimes.
Yes, we are the last. Save the best for last. I wanted to go next, but it's okay.
Oh,
It's okay. We'll go now.
Yeah.
This is
It's
case
your
study
time.
4, presented by myself, Andalisha Glass, Lana, Kim, Michael, and Kelly.
On the backdrop of the story is a small town with 300 school at 300 students, and we all familiar with small town antics. Word travel faster than it gets out. So there was a parent association was concerned about kids in special ed class were getting more attention in the classroom than the kids that was regular ed. So the group went to the principal, and the principal request that the group request that the principal speak to Sylvia, which is the teacher in the classroom, about how the kids were progressing and why they was progressing less, but not as much as group A. So by sending someone to the classroom, they observed that Sylvia was spending too much time with the special ed kids and not looking at the need of the children without disabilities. They also being instructed to help the kids in the integration program with assignments that Sylvia gives them in different subject areas. Eugenia decided first step was to take up issue with Ishmael Ortiz, which is the technical director. Why would this happen in the classroom? Eugenia also asked him to take a look on how the other teachers resolve this situation in the classroom. And on her own, she called Sylvia in to talk to her about what was the information that was gathered.
Can you move to the next slide?
Slide 4.
Andrew Lacy.
I just moved it to slide 4. Did you? Okay, let me try to go back. Hold on. Can you see it now?
No.
No, we're still on slide 2.
I see it. Okay, I see it on my end. Hold on, let me wait a minute.
Okay,
All
there we
right.
go. There we go. Okay. All right. In Brown versus Board of Education, Topeka, we looked at some of the educational laws that went into what needed to make sure that they were being followed, and these were from our reading. So Brown versus Board of Education of Topeka in 1954, that all children have a constitutional right to equal educational opportunities. And then Park versus the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. So all children, regardless of disability, have a basic right to an education under the 14th Amendment, and no law can postpone, terminate, or deny children access to publicly supported education, and described a basic order of preference for placement starting with the public school class. And in that case, it would apply to all the students, the EC students and the regular students being served in the same class, so that with the Brown versus Board being fair. And then the Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990 protects individuals with disabilities from discrimination and guarantees equal access opportunity. So in conjunction with those, we looked at inclusion versus mainstreaming. With inclusion versus mainstreaming, our understanding of inclusion is that it's express commitment to educate each child to the maximum extent appropriate in the school and classroom he or she would otherwise attend. So key points to this, that it involves bringing the support services to the child rather than moving the child to the services. It requires only that the child will benefit from being in the class rather than having to keep up with the other students. And proponents of inclusion generally favor newer forms of education service delivery versus the mainstreaming, the selective placement of special education students in one or more regular education classes. Proponents of mainstreaming generally assume that a student must earn his or her opportunity to be placed in the regular classes by demonstrating an ability to keep up with the work assigned by the regular classroom teacher. And this concept is closely linked to traditional forms of education, special education service delivery. In this particular case, we really feel like both will offer opportunities for the least restrictive environment, and that in both cases, it would depend on what was the best situation for the student. And that's how we would determine which would be better than the other. It would be a case-by-case basis based on the student, because according to the least restrictive environment, you have to maximize the extent appropriate that children with disabilities, including children in public or private institutions or other care facilities, are educated with children who are not disabled. And special classes separate from schooling or other removal of children with disabilities from the regular educational environment occurs only when the nature or severity of the disability of a child is such that education in regular classes with the use of supplementary aids and services cannot be achieved satisfactorily. On a side note, my original degree is in public service to interpret for the deaf. And I was a teacher's, I worked in an EC class with the deaf and hard of hearing. My initial bachelor's certification in education was in deaf and hard of hearing education. And we mainstream students in their elective or their extracurricular activities. So for those students, they would be served. And so this would be like the partial mainstreaming. They were served in their select class just for deaf and hard of hearing, but then I would go with them as their interpreter to PE, to art, to music. And because they were expected to be able to do at the same level as all kids, there was no discrepancy in what their abilities would be with art, with music, with the art or the PE. When I would go and interpret for those students, that was considered the mainstreaming portion for those students. And so that was just an example of the differences between the mainstreaming and the inclusion, where you've got the two teachers in the room at the same time.
So we answered the question, how might the principal approach this and future meetings with her teachers? And we spent a lot of time talking about the culture that she currently has in regards to being an instructional leader, and that she really needs to go into all the meetings with an open mind, and it's really of open communication and staying curious. And that's something that I tend to focus on a lot, is just continue to stay curious and ask questions like, tell me more about what you're doing. She also needs to listen to the teachers and allow time for those teachers to share what's actually happening in the classroom, whether she's in the actual classroom or in a meeting, and giving those teachers an opportunity to kind of talk about what they're doing. When she's in those meetings, to be attentive and to be listening. And I know in my internship, sometimes my principal is doing other work during a PLC meeting, and I know that she has a million things to do, but the teachers notice. And so it's important for her in this situation to always be attentive to her teachers, and then to continue to ask questions during PLC. Teachers are involved in all the decisions that are made, so that the teachers aren't taking over what could be, a high quality instructional classroom.
What is the path that Eugenia should take? Her immediate response should conduct walkthroughs in Sylvia's classroom, not only Sylvia's, but throughout the building. She also should check classroom B to see what is done differently. And she should have a meeting with Sylvia so she can help her come up with strategies to assure that each child is getting the appropriate education and opportunities needed. The path move forward, she should have fidelity checks consistently so she'll know what's going on in the building. And also she should be present in the PLC and data meetings so she'll know exactly what's going on in the building. So she won't be bombarded next time someone comes with her with information that she should be already be prevalent to before someone walk up to her and ask her about a classroom.
Is one point of view more correct than the other? Why? No one point of view is more important than the other. It should be viewed based on the student's needs. Inclusion would benefit students who have an IEP and severe accommodations, and mainstreaming would benefit students with an IEP who needs little support, which piggybacked off of what Lana discussed when she talked about mainstreaming and inclusion. What kind of collaboration from the children's families might the principal and the teachers propose in order to improve the inclusive education program, encourage an appreciation for diversity, and stimulate learning for all the students at the school? We said to provide parent engagement nights and around reading and math instruction, improve communication with parents and stakeholders, invite parents to join the school improvement team and parent advisory council, family nights or lunch and learns that provide information about inclusive education and other topics relevant to the school community, and established a family night where the school celebrates the diversity and academic successes of the school.
Mm-hmm.
So as an expert in the area of learning and evaluation, what might Ismail, the technical coordinator, do to integrate and create some harmony out of differences in opinion among the teachers? I think we all had the same question. Why is a technical coordinator in charge of learning and evaluation? Being an instructional technology coach, I kind of have my feet in both sides, and I couldn't even imagine my IT people walking in and doing any type of, this is what looks good and what doesn't. So that was a big topic, but collaborate with the special education teachers and assist in the design of instruction tailored for each eligible child's needs. Make sure that he's offering his expertise because he has so much, and ask the other teachers to share their expertise in serving all students. So collaboration is a big one. And then also coordinating peer observations, talking about pineapple visits, just going in and watching each other, and then include those also into the PLC discussions. And what actions might Sylvia take with the families of the children in question in order to learn and share the achievements and experiences they have observed among the children? The best one is effective communication. Over communicate. You should always make sure that the first time you're reaching out to parents is a positive, and make sure that you're always communicating, whether it be phone calls, emails, newsletters, talking about social media. That's the quickest, easiest, and most reliable when it comes to parents and teachers and students these days. And the other big one we talked about was the parent advisory committee and student-led conferences, allowing the parents to come in and lead these conferences between the teachers and their parents.
I like that.
And I think last slide is just our references.
Okay, excellent. Well, thank you. All excellent presentations. I want to amplify. It was kind of a funny moment last night in last night's class. What Kelly just said about IT folks. One of our students, I don't think she'd mind, Jessica, she's married to an IT person, and she said they're the last people that you want around teachers or learning or conducting meetings or trying to communicate with people, educational type things. And so that's one of the parts of this, and I'm glad Kelly brought that up. Principals should go do this themselves. But in lieu of that, don't pick the least qualified person on your faculty to do something like that, because who you send tells the people that you sent them to a lot about how important it was to you. And that was a great point that Kelly, I mean, you would not send them. I mean, if you sent somebody like that, then the teachers would know that you weren't really serious. They were just handy.
My computer died. Sorry.
Oh, you're good.
We have a saying in our district that the instructional techs, we're like front of the line Chick-fil-A. We do all the relationship talking, and our IT guys, and they think it's funny, they're like back of the kitchen Burger King style.
That's correct.
So
yeah, you don't let them out to meet the public. They can't be around civilians. That's exactly right. Does not go well. You know, I did a data project, my last big data project in CMS, where we converted Mariner built the dashboard, and I worked with SQL developers, IT guys, to build the cubes to, when you push the button on the dashboard, it generated the report that you wanted. That's about my level of technical ability, but it's a lot more involved than that. But we had to create a separate place for those people. They're socially unacceptable. You don't want them around teachers or kids. I mean, that's just the way it is. And the point here, not to belabor the point, but the point is if you were going to send somebody, which you shouldn't do, but if you were going to have somebody substitute for you, this leads to my next point, then send somebody appropriate. And my next point is if the meeting is worth going to, it's worth paying attention when you get there. Don't be on your phone. Don't be doing work, because teachers, as you said, teachers notice. And it's actually better not to come at all than to come and not be engaged. That's disrespectful to people. Or send somebody that it's kind of insulting to send. That's the whole notion here. We have these meetings not so that we can put a check in the box that we held a meeting. We have them so that we can organize and then go do our work. Or we train so that we can then go and do our work. The meeting itself is not the work of the organization, but it prepares us to then go and do the work. So it is important. So be present and don't send the IT guy. Those are 2 points that you got to understand what we're trying to do by having a meeting. And my last point, then I'll turn it over to Dr. Sane for the benediction. Again, wonderful job. I'm so pleased with everything that you've done. You're a group of stars. But my last one is parent complaints. You've got to focus on what they say, not how they say it. And that is hard. Because they won't always be polite or politic or pleasant. Sometimes they'll say the most racist, misogynist, discriminatory thing in the world, and they'll qualify it before they say it by "I'm not a," and then we'll proceed to explain that they are a, fill in the blank. But you have to listen to the content of what they're telling you, not the way they're telling you, and that's hard. I'm telling you, it's hard, because what you'd like to be able to say to a lot of parents who come in is the problem is your kid's an idiot and it's hereditary. They got it from you, but you can't say that. And so you kind of have to understand, listen to the message, not the messenger. That would be, that's Dale's tip for dealing with parents, especially irate parents, is you have to listen to the message, not what they said, not the way they said it. Dr. Sane, close us out tonight. This has been a great group. They've done a tremendous job. I'm very pleased.
They have. So I'm just going to reference kind of all the case studies in general. And imagine, once you get into the assistant principal role, some of you might already have those roles, you're going to have a case study a day. And I just want you to think about the time and the effort that you put into the work of your presentations and the methodical research and just making sure you are crossing every T, dotting every I. And so throughout the semester, Dr. Lamb's reference, we've got to be our own best advocates. We've got to make sure that we're following all procedures and protocols. So you've got to treat every day in your new roles as it was one of these case studies. Every situation reserves this due diligence. And if you do that, you will have a long and successful career. But that's hard to do, and it's overwhelming, and it gets easier. But if you start off on the wrong foot, it's really hard to get on the right foot. So I just encourage you, as you have these interviews, talk about that methodical practice. Talk about, taking every situation seriously. Talk about listening to what parents say, not how they say it. Just like Dr. Lamb said, that's the best advice you could take. Even use that advice with teachers. Listen to what teachers are saying, not how they're saying it. But just treat every day in your jobs like one of these case studies, and you will have a amazing career. Amazing career.
Yeah, it's about not losing your house. All right, Sandra, you got a question before we go?
I have this random thought, and I don't know where this thought came from, but I'm looking at the Zoom screen. And you know the Brady Bunch, when the show used to come on?
Yeah.
They used to Zoom before we even had a Zoom. And that thought just came up to me. It's like, when it would come on and they'd look up and there's, I just said, I'm sorry, I don't know where it came from, but I said that random moment. Sorry, you guys are amazing.
Always, to your point, I'm even older. It reminds me of the Hollywood Squares.
Yes.
When everybody was in their little box, they had them all on the screen. That's what my screen looks like when I see y'all. I think about the Hollywood Squares. I just try not to be the one in the middle that says the stupid stuff all the time.
I guess it came from that technology discussion when you said keep the people in the kitchen. I don't know. It just came up.
So next week, Dr. Sane's up. He's going to talk about local budgeting, resources, that kind of thing. Very practical view of what you need to do. It's going to be great. And then we'll wrap it up after that. We have on the schedule for a meeting that last week. We might finish up next week. You never can tell. So I might let you off a week early, but don't tell everybody. But we may finish up next week. So be sure it's going to be great next week. So be sure to be here. I'll stop the recording now and I'll stay on if anybody has any questions. And Alicia said she's got an interview. Good luck to her. Kind of my final thought on interview about student behavior, student conduct is I would make sure that I highlighted due process, both what is the substance from your district, your code of conduct, and procedurally that I would follow that. I would make sure that I hit that substantive, that when I process disciplinary cases, student behavior, that we don't want to, but when we do, that we're going to follow the rules, that we're going to follow due process, and so that we won't get sued. That's kind of always the backup on that one. Talk about engagement in class, talk about